research in the next Horizon Europe, focusing on best ways to develop a strong pillar two and deploy the innovative solutions that are needed for Europe's competitiveness, resilience, and decarbonization. And as the title of this event nicely reminds us, it pillar two, it takes two to tango. My name is Federica Boledi. I'm Senior Manager in the Policy team at Orgalim, and I'm your host for this discussion. So before starting, let me share with you a couple of housekeeping rules. This webinar is recorded, and you will receive the link to the recording after the webinar. All participants are automatically muted, and their video is off. But if you want to ask questions to our speakers, and I do hope you do, please write them in the chat. I will introduce some of the questions received from the participants during the Q&A session. You can find today's agenda in the materials section of GoToWebinar. And on this note, let's have a look together at the program for today. We will start in a moment with opening remarks, followed by a keynote by Manuel Alexo from the European Commission, and by a panel discussion among industry, university, and institutional stakeholders. So we have a rich and engaging agenda ahead. I'm looking forward to it. And without further ado, let me now hand over for the opening remarks to Ulrich Adam, Director General at Orgalim, and Matthias Björn-Malm, Secretary General at CESAR. Welcome, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Federica, and I'm really pleased to open this event on behalf of Orgalim together with Matthias Björn-Malm from CESAR. Welcome everyone. Orgalim represents Europe's technologies industries, globally competitive companies with cutting-edge products in engineering, manufacturing, and technologies. Our companies develop many of the product solutions that Europe needs for the green and digital transitions, from advanced manufacturing and automation to electrification, digital technologies, connectivity, and AI. For our industries, Pillar 2 of Horizon Europe is essential. It is the part of the program where collaborative research can happen at scale. It brings companies, universities, research and technology organizations, and other partners onto the same dance floor across borders, disciplines, and value chains. And this is why Pillar 2 matters so much. It is where excellent research can move in step with technological development, industrial needs, and ultimately deployment in the market and in society. In other words, it helps Europe to turn knowledge into innovation and innovation into real-life impact. The timing of today's discussions couldn't be better. The recent Cyprus presidency negotiating box for the MFF puts concrete figures on the table. Unfortunately, they are not so good news. It proposes an overall reduction of 2% compared with the Commission proposal, and a horizontal reduction of nearly 4% for headings covering competitiveness, defense, security, research and innovation, education, crisis management, and external action. Even if this is presented as a moderation of an increase rather than an absolute cut, the political signal is important here. On the one hand, Europe says it wants to invest in competitiveness, resilience, and technological leadership. But to do that, on the other hand, it needs a strong, well-funded, and well-governed collaborative research program. If we want Europe's innovation partners to tango, Pillar 2 must provide the rhythm, the space, and the trust to move together. And yeah, the music is usually defined in terms of the money. This is also why we are pleased to organize this event together with CESAR. The partnership between Orgalim and CESAR is a natural one. Europe's technology industries and Europe's universities of science and technology are closely connected through research, innovation, talent, infrastructure, and deployment. We work on common projects and we bring collaboration to life. We need a strong Pillar 2 to continue offering a space and a structure, you could say a sort of dance floor for the partnership to happen. Today's discussion is an opportunity to look at how we get the choreography right, and in particular the right governance and the right conditions for collaborative research to deliver real impact. I really look forward to the exchange. I thank all speakers in advance, and particularly looking forward and thanking our keynote speaker, Manuel Aleixo from the Cabinet of Commissioner Sarajeva, and all participants for joining us this morning. And with that, I would like to hand over to Matthias.
Thank you very much, Ulrich, and also thank you, Federica, and good morning from my side as well. It is a pleasure to join you today on behalf of CSAR, the strong and united voice of universities of science and technology in Europe. Ulrich has explained why Pillar 2 matters from the perspective of Europe's technology industries, and from the perspective of universities of science and technology, the message is equally clear. Pillar 2 is indeed a key tool for turning Europe's excellence into collective strength. This is important because Europe faces growing pressure to strengthen its competitiveness, resilience, and technological leadership. As Mario Draghi concluded in his landmark report, and I quote, "First and most importantly, Europe must close the innovation gap with the United States and China, particularly in advanced technologies," end quote. And Europe needs to move faster in developing and deploying advanced technologies, faster in building capabilities, and faster in translating knowledge into innovation and societal benefit. At the same time, speed must be built on excellence, openness, and trust. These are among Europe's greatest competitive advantages. Universities of science and technology have a central role to play here. They generate frontier knowledge, educate and train the talent Europe needs, and work with partners across society and industry to create long-term capacity and impact. This is why the discussion on governance is important. Europe needs ambitious and well-funded programs, collaborative research at scale, and governance arrangements informed by excellence, expertise, and a clear understanding of the outcomes we are trying to achieve. Important political choices are now being discussed by the European Commission, the Council, and the European Parliament, and the months ahead will be important in shaping the outcome. FP10 and the ECF will both have important roles to play in strengthening Europe's innovation ecosystem. A key question is, as Ulrich introduced, how closely they should be connected. One approach is to pursue greater strategic coherence through deeper integration between the two. Another is to preserve more dedicated and specialized processes, allowing each instrument to play to its particular strengths. These choices involve trade-offs. Greater integration may strengthen coordination and strategic alignment, but risks more complexity and slower processes. More specialized approaches may allow for faster, simpler, more predictable implementation, but risks less coordination and strategic alignment. Reasonable people can reach different conclusions on where that balance should be struck. That is precisely why discussions such as today matter. Our objective is not necessarily to agree on every single detail on the future architecture. Rather, it is to help clarify the opportunities, trade-offs, and implications of the different political choices currently on the table. This is also why the partnership between Orgalim and CSAR is so valuable. Industry and universities bring different perspectives, but we are both communities that will ultimately help implement these programs in practice. We therefore have both the opportunity, and I would say the responsibility, to contribute constructively to the debate. My thanks to Ulrich and the whole Orgalim team, to Federica for moderating, to all speakers and panelists, and to you for joining us today. I look forward to the discussion. Thank you, and I hand back to Federica.
Thank you. Thank you, Ulrich, and thank you, Matthias, for your introductory remarks, which, in my view, set the scene perfectly for our upcoming discussion. Universities and industries are often portrayed as competing players in the research and innovation environment. And it is refreshing and, frankly, reassuring to see that there are common objectives and shared goals. And we will hear more about shared ideas on the governance for collaborative research in a short while. But before that, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker. Please welcome Manuel Aleixo, Cabinet Expert for the Startups, Research and Innovation Commissioner Ekaterina Zarayeva. In his current role, Manuel works on key EU research policy files, including the European Research Area, research infrastructures, and innovation competitiveness. He brings extensive experience from the Commission's DG Research and Innovation, where he headed work on the European Research Area, as well as prior roles in the European Parliament and in the Portuguese Diplomatic Service. Manuel, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Federica. Thank you for inviting me to this discussion. Um, I would like to start by coming back to Matthias and Ulrich's introduction, because indeed I think it is a great idea to bring a great idea that partners come together in this kind of discussion. And as you mentioned before, these are not partners who are adversaries by any means. They are different actors in our research and innovation ecosystem. So that is extremely important that these discussions take place with all of these actors together. So I really welcome this occasion and I really welcome this discussion. For me, it will be very interesting and important also to hear your views and to hear your ideas. As you know, we interact regularly with the stakeholders, and for us this is extremely important because of course we make our proposals and we assess the impact of our proposals very carefully before making them. But at the end of the day, we understand that a process and an endeavor of such complexity as planning the next framework program for research and innovation is an endeavor that requires a constant dialogue with stakeholders, of course, between the co-legislators, but also beyond the institutional actors, the whole community that in the end are going to be the ones who implement, who benefit, who are directly affected by the decisions that the institutions take. On the issue that brings us here today, let me begin by telling you what I think is the original purpose of the Commission's proposals, both for the CF and for Horizon Europe, and of course, this tight link between both instruments through Pillar 2. One of the concerns of the Commission has been, as you know, to place research and innovation at the heart of European competitiveness. This means that we take very seriously, for example, the Draghi report and the recommendations of the Draghi report. And this means in practice that we need to look carefully at our instruments and at our policies and how we implement our instruments and how we develop our policies. From the point of view of our proposals now for the MFF, you saw that the MFF proposals generally pursued this simplification and streamlining objective. And this is extremely important if we want, in fact, to have a stronger impact for the EU budget. When we look specifically at research and innovation, and we look at the Draghi report, one of the diagnosis that is made in that report is that not only in terms of the volume of R&D intensity, we are still away from our 3% objective that we established in 2002. We are at 2.24 roughly. But more important than that, we are far away from our main competitors, that whether it's the United States, whether it's China, South Korea, etc. We see great disparities in the R&D intensity, both in volume and in percentage of GDP. I won't get into the details, but one of the also important issues that is pointed out in the Draghi report is the fragmentation of investments also between the EU level and, for example, if we compare to the United States. And specifically, the report compares R&D intensity, public R&D intensity in Europe and the United States, where the volumes are not that different, actually. We are not doing that bad in public R&D investment overall. But what we see is that there are 27 budgets, or rather 28 budgets in the EU. There's 27 national budgets and the federal budget, which is Horizon Europe, a very small part of the whole. And we see that in the United States, for example, you have a one federal budget. So from the point of view of volume, we are not doing well. From the point of view of fragmentation, this is an even greater problem. So if you transpose this to our objective of putting R&I at the heart of competitiveness, which we all agree is indispensable, if we look at the objective of increasing R&I investments, but also having more impact in these objectives, there I think our proposals, both for Horizon Europe and for the ECF, become quite understandable and quite clear. It doesn't mean that we agree necessarily on every single detail, of course not, but the objectives, as far as I can tell, are being pursued in a rather clear way. We proposed a European Competitiveness Fund with a strong budget that brings together many different programs and streamlines many different programs. At the same time, we propose Horizon Europe FP10 with an almost doubled budget. It depends a little bit how you count, but in any case, we can all agree that it is substantially a substantial increase in relation to the status quo. The Horizon Europe proposal is, in a way, has some important innovations. One of them is Pillar 2, and I'll come to that in a second. But in a way, it is also quite similar to the current program. And this was deliberate because we also have the concern of not completely revolutionizing our program, not completely revolutionizing how we fund R&I at the EU level. Why? Obviously, because we have a whole community out there, of which you are a part, that has invested a lot in understanding the program and in understanding how to apply, in developing capacities to apply to this very competitive program. And so we didn't want to completely change the face of the program. Otherwise, we would cause an incredibly large disruption to the to our European ecosystem. So what you see is a program that looks more or less like the current one. There are some changes, of course. There is the fourth pillar now that congregates widening research infrastructures era. There is, of course, the possibility of having dual use across the program, and this is something that we can also mention during the discussion. And here is probably the greatest obvious difference. We have a Pillar 2 which is connected, mirrored, if you like, in the Competitiveness Fund. Now, the objective of doing this was, and I start by saying what it was not to transfer funding from Horizon to the Competitiveness Fund, from R&I to industry. And this was one of the points that we had to make most forcefully at the beginning, not just because obviously, you know, the lawyers among us will appreciate this, legally and financially, these are two different instruments, but also from the point of view of R&I policy and more broadly, our EU competitiveness, it would not make sense, of course, because naturally we have to invest in R&I in order to have a competitive industry. So it would not make sense either from a legal and financial construction, but it would not make sense also from a policy point of view. So we are not merging Pillar 2 and the Competitiveness Fund. We are not transferring funding out of our R&I community into industry. On the contrary, what we are doing, as far as we intend, is to provide much better possibilities in this innovation to investment journey, as we like to call it, the possibilities that would emerge in EU funding for all kinds of actors in their journey from knowledge to the market. Now, we know, of course, that this journey is not linear. We have no illusion that this is not a straight line from a lab in the university and a factory. But our concern was not to create a linear connection. It was not to create a sequence, which we, of course, know doesn't exist, especially when we're talking about fundamental science, but to create a certain coherence in terms of how we plan our investments in research and innovation, but also how we plan our industrial investments. The best way that we found to illustrate this in the, not strictly speaking in the legal text, but rather in the explanatory memorandum of the Horizon proposal was through the moonshots. So what we suggest as moonshots are illustrations of how this connection between Horizon and ECF could work. Now, if you look at the moonshots, they are all very different in nature, and they all require different mixes in the ingredients between research and innovation and industry, if you like. If we're talking, for example, about the fusion moonshot, having a fusion reactor operational by, I think it was 2035 that we had in the text, today in fusion, the scientific challenge is still incredibly important. So the need to invest in science and in research in order to achieve such an objective is still very important and requires a lot of investment. But of course, if we do want to achieve such an ambitious objective, we need in parallel to develop the industrial capacities in order to get there. So it's not like you go from the lab to the factory to produce a fusion reactor, but we know that we need to develop in parallel both industrial capacities, industrial products, and at the same time we need to develop the science in order to be able to get there. So this is one example of how these two instruments would have to relate to each other and would have to be somehow coherent, although not necessarily sequential. Another example is, of course, the clean aviation moonshot, where there the industrial challenge is probably much greater today than the scientific challenge, strictly speaking. So there you would need a completely different approach. One last word. I see Federica there telling me to wind up. One last word about the governance, because I understand this is important for this discussion. How do we structure this relationship in practical terms? Do we have, how many work programs do we have? How many program committees do we have, et cetera, et cetera? Now, we were not so explicit on this in our proposal because we wanted to keep a rather light touch to this governance. And we think, again, this is in the context of our simplification efforts. We think it's rather important not to overly bureaucratize the process. So we are, of course, in the process, and we are going to have to discuss further the governance between these two instruments with the co-legislators who are developing their respective views and their respective proposals. And we know that both in the Council and the Parliament, we are not necessarily going in the same direction. But our line as Commission is very, very clear. We do not want to separate the relation, the link between these two programs, because we think that this would be an incredibly missed opportunity for our research and innovation community, for our industry, and for competitiveness in general. So we would advise very strongly against completely dividing both programs in terms of the Horizon Pillar 2 and the policy windows of the ECF to completely separate them, because again, we think that this would be completely counterproductive. We also have to consider a political argument here, which is, I think, very important. We are asking to practically double the budget of Horizon. What for? We have to explain to our member states on whom ultimately the costs of the next MFF will fall upon and will benefit. There's no doubt about that. But we have to explain what it is we want to do differently if we want to double the budget. If we argue that we want to double the budget to do exactly what we do today, just with more money, I'm afraid this argument will not fly with the member states. So I think it's very important to consider when we ask for a stronger budget, which we have, to explain clearly what the added value of that higher budget is and how we are going to make Europe more competitive with that stronger budget. So I stop here and I look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuel, for this interesting speech. I think it's a very good introduction to our upcoming discussion. And thank you also for reminding us of the main objectives of Horizon Europe and to explain the connection with the Competitiveness Fund. We're very lucky to have you staying with us as one of our panelists, and I'm sure we will have the opportunity to exchange further on these elements. And hopefully you will also get some good ideas on governance of Pillar 2 and the ESF from our panelists. So let me start with introducing the panel now. Here we will focus on exploring shared solutions for the future governance of EU-funded collaborative research. And we will hear the perspective of industry and universities on how to ensure that the funding under Pillar 2 is used in the most efficient and effective way to support innovation and competitiveness. So I would like to jump straight into it, announcing the first two panelists. And Manuel, you're welcome to switch off the camera for this moment and then come back later. Thank you. Please join me in welcoming Laure Doulier, Manager, Energy, Climate and Innovation at Orgalim, and Louise Drogul, Senior Advisor for Innovation and Sustainability at CESAR. Laure and Louise will set the scene for the discussion, presenting how the two organizations see the right governance for collaborative research. Welcome to you both.
Thank you very much, Federica, for introducing us. And I'm very happy to talk to you today about our joint vision with CESAR about Pillar 2 and the governance. So it's been some time that we're discussing together. We quickly saw that there would be a real value for industry and university to present where we align, because that's extremely helpful also in the decision process and for all the decision makers involved to understand from the users of the program what matters to us most and where we see the way that FP10 should go to have maximum impact and to close our innovation gap, because that's where we all want to act today for the next horizon. So looking at that, we quickly saw that we definitely have a shared foundation. That's already what Matthias and Ulrich mentioned at the introduction remarks. So for us, definitely the strong program is of utmost importance. And we do welcome indeed the continuity of Horizon, what Manuel said, not a revolution, but a continuation. But also the fact that the Competitiveness Fund bring that added ingredient to work on that innovation gap and to set really strategic objective for competitiveness and where we need to act exactly. So we do see having the strong Horizon Europe and having Competitiveness Fund guiding or giving the strategic direction is very good news. We also do very welcome, of course, the fact that the budget is ring-fenced, that we have specific lines for both programs. And the non-linear innovation journey, I think that's also what Manuel mentioned. We do have very different situation in very different industrial and research project, and this needs to be taken into account. So it's the bottom-up aspect as well of the innovation context in Europe. The fact that we need a stronger ecosystem and have that drive that comes from us, from the users, from the academia, and from industry in defining the program of FP10 and of ECF. So for us, really, we need both program. We need the fact that innovation, research, invention happens in FP10, and to have that deployment instrument under the ECF. I'll ask you to go to our next slide, please. So we actually, while discussing with Louise and with our members, both members, we saw 7 points where we align, and Louise and I will go through that. I will start with the first point, and we'll go over the different aspects together. So two-strong program, that's really the first point that's already mentioned. We do see also the advantage of having that two separate aspect. There's two different logic in the program, the innovation and then the deployment part. The fact that we have two distinct regulation is also having that legislative certainty behind is an advantage as well. The two budgets, also the objectives are different, but the strategic direction do align. Different governance and the awarding aspect as well, logic that differs between the two. For us, is where we have to see those two programs working together. Second point is for you, Louise.
Yes, thank you, Laure, and thank you all for having me today. So yes, for the second point, we discussed shared but not merged programming, in the sense that we support strategic programming cycle that can help align priorities across FP10 and the ECF, by making sure we preserve their different missions, their different goals, their different legal bases and intervention logics. And this is important because we need more coherence, not more confusion. And that can help identify where collaborative research is needed, where industrial transformation is needed, where infrastructure skills are needed, and where deployment bottlenecks need to be addressed at different places. And that kind of alignment can actually reduce duplication. It can connect research agendas with industrial needs where needed. And support this more joined up approach between universities, industry, public authorities, and other ecosystem actors that, as we've been saying, is a need. We have a problem in Europe that we need to solve. But that doesn't mean we should merge both programs, because FP10 should not simply become the early stage pipeline of the ECF. It has its own role in the machine, in the system. It supports collaborative, often pre-competitive research and innovation, and it creates knowledge, partnerships, talent, and technological options before there's even always a clear route to market or deployment. So that also needs to be protected. And it doesn't matter just for universities, it also matters for industry, because you also need a strong collaborative research base. You need space to work with universities and research actors before technologies are mature enough for deployment. And industry also needs access to emerging knowledge, talents, infrastructures, and so on. So that's why it's really important to preserve the distinct logic of both program, but also make sure that they're not completely disconnected, because then we risk losing promising results in the gap between research and deployment. So there's a balance that needs to be struck, and this is where we try to present this interface, this landing zone, where we can bridge two deployments, but it doesn't turn FP10 into a deployment program as well. And I'll just hand it back to you, Laure.
Thank you, Louise. Yes, exactly. The interface, it's the main point for us, where we need to have something very concrete. As you said, when the logic of innovation is happening in FP10, we need the link to the deployment that the ECF provides. And it's so far in the, let's say, today and in the previous Horizon Europe, that's where really we saw an issue, because you work on an innovation program, you work on a project, and then that's where, you know, there's a stop there, and you don't see the concrete market uptake, you don't see the results progressing, because you don't have that transition happening between the different stages. So we need the concrete way. So between the two programs, people speaking together, experts speaking together. And we especially need that the alignment with the industry needs and the market needs has to be expressed. So this is where we see we need some solution now from the decision makers to provide that interface. And we ready to discuss with them, definitely. And there's some interesting ideas flying around, but that's really on the governance side. We need things to happen.
And on the beneficiary, yes, on the beneficiary side, maybe to make it a bit more practical and concrete, when we talk about this interface, it's also not about just governance. It's also about how the system looks like for beneficiaries trying to move through it. Because one risk is that every stage just feels like a complete reset. So a consortium may receive support under FP10, build a strong partnership, etc. But then when it tries to move to another stage, potentially ECF, then it may have to start over almost from zero. So this would be inefficient. So we need strong collaborations and a system that's not just a conveyor belt, but that provides different plug-in points and fast tracks to, say, milestones-based advancements or reuse of prior assessments, just to be able to go faster. And this would just really be an advantage for Europe. And Manuel talked about the moonshots, which could be a very useful way to create the strategic direction and connect different parts of the system if they're designed well. So we're not necessarily against that direction, but moonshots should not become the only way FP10 and ECF speak to each other, because that could risk creating a very visible strategic pathway and leaving the broader collaborative RNI ecosystem without clear routes forward. So for us, I think moonshots can be part of this interface, but they shouldn't sit within a wider, they should sit within a wider architecture, not be the only connection point for beneficiaries. And so the question is whether they're designed as part of a real FP10 ECF interface, open enough to capture emerging knowledge, strategic enough to support European priorities, and practical enough to help beneficiaries and actors move from research to deployment. Back to you, Laure.
I think we go to the next slide.
I think it's me again, actually.
It's you again.
Yes. So talking about ecosystems, actually, this is essentially what I was saying, that it's just about an entire ecosystem. It's Europe's competitiveness is not going to be built only by funding individual projects. It will be built by strengthening the environments where innovation can actually happen, mature, and scale. And that also means skilled people, research and technology infrastructure, long-term university industry collaboration, startup and scale up with access to knowledge, talents, facilities, finance, public authorities creating the right framework, conditions, and so on. So when we're talking about this interface, we're not only thinking of it as a funding pipeline, but as an ecosystem architecture where we can all work together, and where universities, industry, they're not isolated actors, they're central to this ecosystem and are part of a wider industrial innovation fabric or system. Because universities, they train the talent that companies need, they host and connect research infrastructures, we support startup and spin-outs and so on. And on your side, industry brings equally essential strengths, understanding technological needs, value chains, etc. So the strongest model is actually not industry-led or university-led in its isolation. It's really a connected ecosystem model. And through this webinar, this is really what we're trying to do, as we've said several times already today, that we're not here as opposed competitors in a sense. We're really there as actors, part of the same ecosystems, wanting to work together and make sense of this ecosystem.
Thanks, Louise. Yeah, and that brings me also where we want to be involved, because there's a need to take into account the bottom-up front, and we also always say this in the debates, top-down, bottom-up. For the program to have a real impact, you need to have experts also at the right point of decision and programming aspects. So we see really an importance for research and industry to be present at two specific, let's say, milestone. First on the programming aspect, and we see that on the ECF, there's the stakeholder board that will be involved to discuss that strategic programming. We think there we need to have that industry and research expertise present right from the beginning, and that's where the two already align together. But it's also on the implementation of a research project on the Pillar 2. There's also the work program intervening at that point. So that's where we want industry, our expert, to be there with the Commission to discuss what needs to be done. And the last point is, of course, having that European angle, European lens. This cross-border collaboration is a real asset from our companies. They say you can do that in Europe and you cannot do it anywhere else. So that's where the value stands. And we need to follow excellence anytime a strategic program and deliver that impact on innovation that we need for our competitiveness. I will close there. Thank you, Federica.
Thank you both, Laure and Louise. You gave us a lot to think about and discuss in this panel. So I'm sure we'll have a very good discussion in a moment. I just wanted to remind the audience that you're welcome to ask questions in the chat, and these questions will be collected by us, and depending on how much time is left at the end of the panel, we will be able to ask them to the speakers. So I don't want to take away time from what I'm sure will be a very interesting exchange. So let me introduce the rest of the speakers for this policy discussion. Manuel, please join us again. And then we have Lisa Eriksson, Head of KTH Innovation and CEO of KTH Ventures. Since 2002, Lisa has held several roles at the KTH Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden. And today she is CEO of the investment arm of the Institute and the founder and head of KTH Innovation. She holds several board seats in the innovation ecosystem, and she is a member of the advisory council at PRV, the Swedish Intellectual Property Office. And last but not least, Magnus Madford, Head of Technical Regulations at Ericsson. Magnus represents Ericsson in key policy and industry forums on research, innovation, and standardization. With more than 3 decades of experience, he has contributed to major international collaborations, including as a founding member of the EU's 5G public-private partnership, and has held numerous board roles across academia and industry. Welcome to you all. And so now we heard the presentation from Laure and Louise on how to make collaborative research more efficient and effective, thanks to a strong governance where industry also has a role to play. And now I would like to ask a question to each of you, starting with Lisa, if that's okay. So Lisa, how can Horizon Europe better align academic research agendas with Europe's competitiveness needs and still preserve the scientific excellence and openness?
Yes, so thank you all, and I'm happy to be in this panel. I think there is a risk of echo some things that have already been said, but I think it's important to repeat as well. But as many have said, we don't lack excellence in Europe. We have world-class universities, we have outstanding researchers, we have very innovative entrepreneurs, and we have globally competitive industries. But what we do lack is that the speed, the scale of capital, and we do have too much fragmentation, as already been mentioned several times. So too often we generate breakthrough knowledge, but struggle to transform it into scalable companies, growing industrial value chains and technologies that succeed globally while remaining anchored in Europe. So that's why this debate on FP10 and the European Competitive Fund is so important. For me, I want to highlight 3 points in this. I think first we need to make sure that we have an innovation continuum, not institutional integration. So it's really important that we keep the FP10 and ECF as 2 distinct instruments with different goals, different government structures, and different operations logics. And this is a true strength. It's not a weakness. The role of FP10 is to bring together universities, industries, startups, and public actors to create new knowledge. And ECF has a completely different mission. It is designed to accelerate industrial deployment, strengthen strategic value chains, and support the scale-up of technologies. So the question is not whether the integration between them is strong enough. It's how they interact with each other, and we need to make sure that not only the moonshots, but different parts of interactions. So second, we must make sure that innovation will be able to move between the instrument without losing the momentum. Today, too many promising innovations, they encounter friction when moving from research to commercialization and from commercialization to large-scale industrial deployment. And we cannot afford these innovation resets. Working at an industry with a lot of, we have a lot of spin-offs and a lot of industry collaboration, but we really struggle to make sure that not to start the companies, that we actually spin out quite a lot of companies, but also to make them grow and scale here from Europe. So research results, teams, and technologies and companies should be able to progress through the system with continuity, speed, and minimal administrative burden. So I believe that also I want to highlight EIC here because I think EIC plays a particularly important role. So it supports the breakthrough at precisely the stage where technology risk remains high. Markets are uncertain and private investment is often unavailable. And if we want more scale-ups, we need stronger pathways between collaborative research and entrepreneurial ventures and private capital and industrial deployment. And companies should not be lost in the gap between programs, funding instruments, and policy objectives. And the third one, I want to stress the importance of European universities in the innovation ecosystems. So we are not only places for education and research. We create spin-offs. We host leading research infrastructure valuable for both industry and scale-ups. We attract talents, and we build innovation ecosystems across regions and across borders. And increasingly, we are the source of deep tech ventures that will shape Europe's future competitiveness. FP10 is not simply a deal flow generating for existing industry alone. It's a place where future industries are created. And the breakthrough science and entrepreneurial ventures emerging from European universities have the potential to redefine entire sectors, just as ASML transformed a niche technology into a capability that underpins the global semiconductor industry and control 100% of the market. And this is why universities and industries should not be seen as competing industries. In fact, we share a common objective. So large industrial companies, they need innovation, talent, and new capabilities to remain globally competitive. And university spin-offs, we need customers, partners, supply chains, and scale-ups to path.
You're muted, Federica.
Voilà. Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Lisa. Now I would like to ask Magnus. So how can EU-funded collaborative research be better aligned with industrial value chain needs? and especially in enabling technologies. I'm thinking digitalization, connectivity, automation, advanced manufacturing.
Okay. Good question. I hope you can hear me, and thank you very much for inviting me for today. Let's start by challenge a bit, because I think we have heard too many alike thinking. So let's present this slide here. I would say that research cannot be seen in isolation. And I just jump over to what was mentioned by a few earlier, that we need to find ways of bringing the knowledge to the market. And that's where we can say that in Europe, we have excellent research. We have excellent framework programs, and they have served us well for many decades in doing collaborative research. But where we fail in Europe, and we fail hard, that is to bring our own innovations into market and making products that actually market take up. That gives us hands-on experience, what works, what can be made better, and so on. So Europe is far behind other countries and regions when it comes to picking up and using what we have created and what we have already invested in the research programs and in standardization. I'm thinking about connectivity, for instance. And that makes us less prepared for doing research on what comes for the next generation. I mean, if we compare with other regions, other countries which are using the technologies that we have already done research and standardization and innovations upon, they know much better than we in Europe what works and what can be improved, and they are much more better off to do the research going forward. So that is not a research problem for us in Europe. That is more a systemic issue that we have and that we need to look at, because it will have consequences for European competitiveness and sovereignty, and also the possibility of attract the best talent, which we actually need. But looking more importantly on I started off by saying research cannot be seen in isolation. If I simplify quite a bit, from an industry perspective, being competitive, we can say 4 things. First of all, we need cutting-edge knowledge to compete, and that's what we are building in our R&D programs. And then we, of course, need to understand and make sure that our products works with other products in the market, sort of in the ecosystem of the products. And that we do in standardization. But then we also need to make sure that the investments that we do, the public and the private investments that we do in research and standardization and later on innovation, that we protect those, that we sort of own the product that we put on the market, and that we can do with intellectual property framework. And then last but not least, we need to ensure that we are able to put our products on the market, accessing a large market, and that is a little bit about regulation. And I put that sort of on the top part of this slide here to illustrate how these different things work together. And we need in Europe to be not only good at what is now at the core. The core of the innovation engine is the knowledge, building the knowledge, and where the framework programs have served us for decades and works very well. But we need to put it into context. We understand how research, standardization, the legal framework, the regulatory environment all work together, and how we also stimulate and make market take-up happen here in Europe and not elsewhere. And that brings us to thinking what was given to me as one of the topics, the digitalization. Well, I mean, that is really an area where things are measured, because in the digital world, standards define the market. And if European industry is not present in the research programs and the standardization bodies, and also in the policy bodies, policy rooms, those markets, digitalization markets, they will be defined by others going forward. And that is something that we need to prevent. So the overall discussion when it comes to defining or discussing the priorities and structure for the next multi-financial framework. Yes, budget is important, but budget alone is not enough, I would say. So the need for industry involvement, and what can we say about that? Well, I mean, I think we have discussed that many times, that the industry needs to be involved when it comes to setting the priority. It's not new. We are, I think I was introduced as having being in this system for more than 3 decades. It's a bit too long, perhaps, I don't know. So I've seen this debate a couple of times. And I think we have quite a good number of things already existing. And recently we saw also, I think it was last year or the year before that, reports proposing to set up what was referred to as European Technology Industry Competitiveness Council, to have an independent expert-led body that would steer the collaborative research pillars of FP10. In parallel, we also saw a proposal of having a technology council for the European Competitiveness Fund to sort of use structure industry-grounded input when it comes to setting the priorities. And I think those proposals also made references to what we already have, and we can actually use also in the next multi-financial framework. And those are for instance, the European technology platforms. Those are the existing public-private partnerships, joint undertakings, where we have good preparatory works on what's called the SRAI, the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda, which leads forwards the points from industry. So to round up at the end, what do we need? What do we need actually? I mean, industry needs 3 things. We need a seat at the table. We don't really want to be consulted after the programs have been decided or the priority has been set. And we need long-term stability. Our cycles are normally in 10 plus years. And then last but not least, we need risk sharing that works. And that is, I can conclude with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks. I know there is a lot to say on this topic, and it has all been very, very good suggestions and comments. We're running a little bit late, so I would like to ask one final question to Manuel before we open the floor for questions from the audience. If you can, Manuel, be short in the reply, that would be really appreciated. So stakeholders often call for stronger industry and research stakeholders' involvement in priority setting. How does the Commission view this balance between direction, openness, and stakeholder participation?
Yeah, thank you very much. I can be very brief in replying to that, although I would have many comments about everything that's been said so far. So specifically on that, I think several of the panelists have touched upon the involvement of experts in the governance, the involvement of stakeholders in the governance. I think these are different things. So just to distinguish very clearly, in our proposal, in the ECF proposal, we proposed an observatory on emerging technologies, and this is definitely for experts to be involved. And we proposed the strategic stakeholders board, I think it's called like that, exactly for the involvement of stakeholders. So, and then there's the possibility of having thematic panels on thematic boards, the stakeholder boards. So that is how we foresaw in the governance the involvement both of experts and of stakeholders. And I think I agree with everybody who said stakeholders have to have a seat at the table. They have to be involved. They have to be consulted before decisions are taken. Now, this is already to an extent what happens today, by the way. So it's not like we don't actually consult stakeholders today. We do in a very active way. I mean, in this policy area, we do this all the time and in a very consistent way, I think. But in the ECF proposal, we have these 2 ideas that we put forward. I know, and I think Magnus referred to that obliquely, there was the report by the group chaired by Manuel Leitor a couple of years ago on the Align Act Accelerate. It's called about with suggestions for the future program, many of which we actually took on board. For example, the dual use, etc. So many of these suggestions were indeed incorporated in our proposal. One of them was to have these councils of experts to direct the programming. This we did not take on board, although again, we do have the involvement of experts in our proposal, which could even be made stronger. This we have no issue with. But the idea, I think, was qualitatively different, which was to have the experts, councils of experts, I think he called it like that, being themselves responsible for carrying out the programming. Now, this is problematic also from a constitutional point of view, because the work programs legally have to be implementing acts, so the Commission has to adopt them, and there we need to involve the member states also. So it is not something that either the Commission or the member states could accept, that the experts themselves decide on the work programs. And I think beyond the constitutional aspect, it's not necessarily what you meant, Magnus, but this was what I think was behind the idea behind the report. And also from a practical point of view, this could lead to many difficulties in terms of conflict of interest, etc., etc. So, but don't get me wrong, absolutely, there should be the involvement of experts well upstream from the decision-making process, so that this expertise can be incorporated in the decision-making process. This is exactly how we think that things should happen, and in parallel, stakeholders should be heard and should be heard again ahead of the decision-making process. So these things are very well understood and certainly taken on board. Again, I think we've diverged a little bit between the Council and the Parliament in the directions that they're taking, but we hope that in the negotiation that will come after the summer, we will be able to find a common approach based on these principles. Yes, experts need to be involved upstream, and stakeholders need to be consistently consulted.
Thank you. Thanks. This is, I think, a very positive feedback that we get from you, Manuel. So unfortunately, I think we need to move directly to the Q&A session. I say unfortunately because I did have other questions for you, but time flies. So, and we received a few questions, and I'm afraid I have to apologize also to the audience because we won't be able to ask all of the questions. So I will ask one question to Manuel because it's directed to him, and then if we have enough time, there would be another one for industry panelists. So. The question says, Manuel, you spoke about innovation, saying that it is not linear. And does it mean that also on the funding schemes, we should not expect sequential funding? So if a project receives fundings under FP10, will it also receive ECF funding afterwards?
Thank you. This is very good because it allows me to go back to something that I think Louise mentioned, or Laure, I can't remember exactly, but it was during your interventions, which is about the issue of having being able to move from Horizon Europe to ECF, right? So you mentioned this, and for the need to have this kind of continuity of funding. So in our proposal, we didn't really explicitly foresee any such continuity. These programs are excellence-based, they're competitive, so we should never presume that anybody has the right to anything. Everybody has to compete, and we try to fund always the best. Now, having said that, we do see that there is certainly merit for opening up possibilities to move from Horizon, again, in a competitive way, but to move from Horizon to the ECF. And the European Parliament, in its draft amendments, now has some interesting ideas there that I think we should explore in the negotiations later on. So to have, I don't know if we can call it a fast track, or if we can look at specific instruments, but to have instruments that allow, for example, a project that has been funded under Horizon to be able to have eventually a more streamlined application procedure, for example. Why not? But I think I do take the point that we need to have the perspective under the ECF, which is more of a deployment fund, that allows that. I think Lisa spoke about the EIC, so this is a typical kind of pipeline of companies, if you wish, that could benefit from having access to an industrial deployment program. Can we have a kind of a more streamlined access from Horizon, for example, EIC, but not necessarily just EIC, to ECF? I think these are interesting ideas to explore. I don't know to what extent all of this needs necessarily to be in the legislation, or if we can at programming level articulate this better. Just perhaps one last comment that I think also Lisa mentioned and Magnus also addressed to some extent, which is the whole scaling up discussion. I know that this is probably beyond the remit of our discussion today, but just to say that we are very, very conscious of that. And we have just created, it was announced a week ago, the Scale Up Europe Fund, which is a fund that brings together, it will be privately managed. So the fund manager has already been selected. It will be EQT, and it brings funding from the Horizon Europe budget, from the EIC budget, but also from a large number of important private companies in Europe. So private, mostly private Scale Up Europe Fund, privately managed, where the EIC is also an investor, or the Horizon Europe is also an investor. So I think this is very good news, and we have to continue working in this direction.
Thank you so much, Manuel. And so I think perhaps we have the time for this one final question. I will read it for you, and then please let me know who wants to answer that. Briefly, if possible, also. So is the technology industry sufficiently proactive in finding the right partnerships and putting their money where their mouth is in terms of financial support for academic research? Who wants to go? Magnus, please.
Yes, Magnus here. At least I will try to address part of it. Yes, I think the European industry has been and still is very proactive when it comes to finding the right partnerships and to carry out the different parts of the systems, which I was illustrating earlier on, when it comes to the research programs, when it comes to standardization, innovation programs, and so have you, and also large trial and demonstrations before actually commercial take up. That has been very successful, and I mentioned the European technology platforms. I mentioned the private-public partnerships, and all those they gather together hundreds, if not more than thousands, of different actors and all different stakeholders, being academia, universities, SMEs, enterprise organizations, and so on, to really come together and to develop the strategic research and innovation agendas, the priorities, which actually is updated on a yearly basis, provided not only to the Commission but also to member states for doing the national prioritization when it comes to area. And the purpose of that is all to find new possibilities, go together and to find partnerships to carry out what's important for you as an actor in those discussions.
Thank you, Magnus. Lisa, I see you also would like to add something.
I think that I would just add something, because I agree with Magnus. Of course, we have a long history of working very closely together, and I think that there has definitely been some success to this. But I also believe that it's where we are right now. I think there is an urge to actually find new ways of collaborating, and I think we need to change the culture on how we interact with each other. And I strongly believe also what was mentioned before, that we need to have more of a systems approach in how we collaborate as well. I think it's really important to bring the stakeholders in the specific projects. Now, I'm not talking about the program itself, but the specific progress that we do together, because large industry are extremely important to bring new innovation to the market. But if we would have excelled in this, I don't think that we would be where we are right now. I think we need to understand that if we want change, we need to start working in a different way. And a better collaboration between industry and universities and spin-offs is crucial to make that happen. So I think this is a clear opportunity we have to reset things and start working in a better way, have joint visions and working together, industry and startups and university ecosystems. I think that's the key to many of the challenges that Europe face.
Thank you, Lisa. So I see Magnus raised his hand and Laura too, but we really don't have enough time to discuss all. I would like to give maybe 30 seconds to Magnus just to respond, and then we move to the closing remarks. I think this is very good. It shows that there is a lot of interest in this topic, but unfortunately we can't discuss it fully today. Magnus, please.
Yeah, I just want to echo and support what Lisa and also Manuel said earlier. I mean, we have a lot of different instruments and working together. But what I illustrated, or we illustrated here today, I mean, the system research is part of a larger system, and these different components, they require different ways of working together. Just to illustrate, I mean, we as an industry, we work together with our competitors in the pre-competitive research programs, but we cannot work with our competitors when it comes to the innovation and close to market take-up activities. That's where we're going to cooperate with other stakeholders. So there is not one system that fits all the different phases of the system. We need to have the different tools for all the different phases that complement each other. And I think that was brilliantly mentioned by both Manuel and also Lisa and also others. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's really time to wrap up now, and I would like to thank our panelists for a great discussion. Lots of food for thoughts there, clearly. I would like to hand over to Ulrich Adam, Director General of Orgalim, for the closing remarks. You can see on the screen a couple of important points for you to know. But this being said, I wish you a good start of the week, and I leave you in the good hands of Ulrich for the closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Federica, and thank you all for a wonderful panel. I've learned a lot of things, took a lot of notes, and I think, again, we have a common journey ahead in the coming months to see both the ECF and the Horizon proposals through. I think it's also become clear it takes far more than two to tango. I think it needs collaborative approaches. It's great to see, I think, the collaborative approach coming here live in the panel discussion, but also in the broader participants that joined us this morning. I was reminded of the old saying, it takes an entire village to raise a child. So I think we need to all work together to make both ECF and Horizon with a special focus on Pillar 2 a success. It was mentioned over and over again by all the panelists, how big the challenge, the strategic challenge for Europe is. We need speed. We need to bring our innovation, our knowledge to the market. We need streamlined industrial deployment. In this, for us and for CESAR, I think a strong Pillar 2 is really the key place to deliver with a stable and ambitious budget, and the proper model is one of the keys for Europe to address this. Again, we need to keep the conversation alive. This will still be a debate for the coming months. Possibly we can come back to this with another webinar later in the year. Also potentially on the specific issue of scaling, which the Commission now takes a special focus on. But I would like to close here. Thank again our wonderful panelists and speakers, Manuel, Lisa, Magnus, Laura, Louise, Matthias, and congratulate you, Federica, for a very smooth and insightful moderation. I would also like to extend my warm thanks to our colleagues in the communications team, Federica, Julia, Sarah, who've been in the background, quietly making sure this all works, and we'll make sure we spread the word. And I encourage all of you to spread the word about this insightful discussion on social media And again, I think this is the beginning of further conversations. So thank you all and have a wonderful day, and let's dance together. Thank you.
Thank you. Partners in this kind of discussion and in this kind of